Desert Radio.
The project where those houses are is a project which has not yet reached practical completion.
I get the feeling someone somewhere is not patient enough.
We are going to occupy those houses. Now, the government has two options here. It's either going to be a peaceful occupation or it's going to be forceful.
Why should I be concerned then? The police have many cases which they are investigating.
We have responded accordingly, and I don't know why the same newspaper, the Namibian, called.
Government have availed 142 million for the independent stadium as well as other infrastructures that they want to develop.
Desert Radio 95.3, the bold voice.
If we become content with our surroundings, we'll do nothing to change it. There won't be a Namibian music scene if there's only a vintage music scene, for instance. Just pushing shows and pushing music in the capital.
Maybe they need to go out there and do some research. It is a small industry, man. Seriously, we cannot be failing like that.
Arts can employ and can create employment within the country, and we just need to make sure that we look at those things. And that's the power and the value of art.
Desert Radio, the bold voice.
You worked hard for your money, and DSTV gives you a whole lot more for a lot less than you think. Instead of one takeout dinner, how about treating the family to a whole month of the best entertainment with DSTV? From thrilling sports, blockbusters, captivating series, to entertaining kid shows, we have it all.
Totally awesome.
And with DSTV Stream, you can watch on the go.
I'm here.
Plus, you can choose a package to suit your pocket. There's a whole lot more to enjoy for a lot less than you think with DSTV.
Unfiltered.
Our own state has had great growth in policy and legal reform processes that has also brought the sodomy law under review within the LRDC, and also that this particular law has reached a parliament.
Current.
If you don't have competencies, the right ways of appointing all these people, except maybe for the minister who's a political appointee, but even then, the minister is not going to breathe down instructions that go contrary to the purpose of the enterprise.
Impactful.
That's the whole point of this discussion today, to see if the laws that have been created in this country are actually consistent and compatible with the language of the Constitution itself. And that is the work of the justices.
All in one space. The 40-minute run. Exclusive to Desert Radio.
This is a Desert Radio, the bold voice. Thank you so much for making some time for us this afternoon. Welcome to the rerun, where we bring you stories that we've covered earlier during the day. My name is John Colin Namene. Now, today we'll be giving you a story about how Namibia has been rocked by gender-based violence, motivated murders this week that have seen the death of 3 women. The murder of a woman in Usakos has been widely condemned by the community via protest action, and this came after a strong worded statement from the town's mayor, Irene Simeon-Kurtz. Another woman was murdered in Mariental, and another got killed here in Windhoek, prompting widespread outrage. Earlier this morning, we spoke to the spokesperson of the Ondonga Traditional Authority, Frans Enkali, as well as clinical psychologist Shaun Whitaker, to unpack this issue and the scourge of gender-based violence. We'll welcome the 40-minute run now, and it's not the best discussions to have, but it's an important one to have. Nonetheless, Namibia has been rocked really by gender-based violence, motivated murders this week that has seen the death of 3 women. The murder of a woman in Usakos has been widely condemned by the community via protest action. This came after a strongly worded statement from the town's mayor, that's Irene Simeon-Kurtz. We then saw another woman being murdered in Mariental, while another got killed here in Windhoek, prompting widespread outrage. And in order to discuss this, we are joined by the spokesperson of the Ondonga Traditional Authority, that's Frans Enkali, as well as clinical psychologist Dr. Shaun Whitaker. Mr. Frans Enkali.
Yeah, I'm very well. Thank you.
Indeed. And to you, Dr. Shaun Whitaker.
John Collins.
Indeed. Now, Mr. Enkali, you are all the way in Ondonga, sure, and that's mainly, the constituents that you serve. But this still being an issue that affects the entire nation, perhaps just your reaction first and foremost to the news that we have been reading and seeing over the past couple of weeks, resulting in these murders of these 3 women.
Yeah, that news, whoever had heard it, a true Namibian, a real human being,
will be really disappointed and shocked. And it is a very painful news that we do not want to have our people, women, to be killed in what many people are referring to as a passion killing. I do not know even how passion can it be if one is killing the loved one. Yeah, that news is shocking. And from the side of the Traditional Authority, we don't condone such things. And there is not even a way the Traditional Authority Act have permitted any act of violence in that way. So we are all concerned, and we think people who have got psychological education, I think maybe our population now, they need civic education to understand what it means to be in a relationship. So really the Ondonga Traditional Authority have been shocked by the news.
And maybe that's a perfect segue to bring you in here, Dr. Whitaker. There's always been this connection between quote-unquote passion killing, gender-based violence, and mental stability, mental health, of either victims and or perpetrators. Is that connection true?
Well, let me first of all say, John Colin, that I think these incidents, are really outrageous and completely unacceptable. And one can only empathize with the families who lose a loved one in, such a terrible way. It is something that we have to continue to address as a country and obviously, to try to stop it. Unfortunately, there's a lot of emotions involved in a situation like this. An intimate relationship is different from all the others in the sense that, there's all these intense emotions, there's no boundaries. It's a very unique relationship in so many ways. If you love someone, it's a very intense emotion. It's a wonderful emotion. We as human beings, we are, meant to bond with others, to be attached to others. And love, of course, represents that, as that really positive attachment to someone else. But, of course, when that relationship comes to an end, you get a whole range of emotions, a real, sense of outrage, anger. I think, unfortunately, there's this need to take revenge on this person for how dare she, want to end the relationship. So from a psychological point of view, yes, of course, there's a whole range of emotions involved. Passion is an interesting way to describe it. I'm not always convinced, that it's the proper description of what is going on. Because for me there's a huge sociological factor, John Colin, namely patriarchy in the background, and perhaps certainly for me there's not only passion involved here. I think there's anger, like I said, there's revenge taking, and of course, like I said, there's patriarchy as well, and perhaps certainly from my point of view, patriarchal killing is perhaps a more appropriate description. Like I said, I understand the focus on the emotions, but I think we need to be mindful of some of the other factors as well. Because, besides the emotional part, and unfortunately so many of these men simply cannot handle their emotions very well. Anger is a very, very strong emotion. And of course, we teach men from early on to, be strong, don't show emotions. And it's such an unhealthy thing to say to men, to say to boys, because we are born with these emotions. We are born with certain basic emotions. They are there. They will always be there. What we need to be saying to boys and to men is, it's okay to have emotions. Let us talk about this. Let us talk about how you have to manage these emotions, When you fall in love, when you feel sad, when you feel anxious, when you feel angry, like I said before, because anger is such a powerful emotion, I think that's very often the one people struggle with the most, because it's so intense, it cuts off the thinking brain. So what we should rather be doing is to say to men, it's okay to have emotions and learn to manage this. And and of course, women have the right to stop a toxic relationship. I mean, certainly from my experience as a psychologist, women, don't walk away easily, or they're not, unlike men, women are not easily unfaithful.
Indeed. And Doc, I just want to stop you there, because I do want to save that discussion, or that point of the discussion for later stage. I just want to bring in Mr. Enkali here quickly, and just look at the role of traditional authorities, which is one of the institutions in society that is looked at as a foundation, for people's behaviors, for their beliefs, their perceptions, etc., etc. Is there responsibility, you feel, Mr. Enkali, from the traditional authority to not only speak on these matters, but to direct behavior when it comes to issues of gender-based violence?
Yes, I think that is very much what one might think, and even observing that the traditional authority have got a role to play in that. And when we are talking about, or one is talking about traditional authority, we should not look at those that are in possession of traditional leadership. We should talk about traditional authority, including the community themselves, that the upbringing that was based on tradition and culture can be used to change that whole situation. If the community from household level can embark upon that journey to say, this is not acceptable in our community and in our society, so that the education of these young ones can start at home. As they say, charity begins at home. And without that customer or traditional education or upbringing, then we will grow up people, and they say you will not be able to change them once they grow up with that misunderstanding. So the role there is that the traditional authority should enforce those traditional values that are constructive, and that can also contribute to the reduction of gender-based violence.
Indeed. And I want to bring in a word that Dr. Whitaker used, which was the word patriarchy. There's usually this connection between traditional the values and traditional authorities and the word patriarchal, seeing that Africa generally is viewed as having a very patriarchal history. The traditions in African values are very patriarchal at nature. Do you think there's a connection between the extreme side of patriarchy and this violence that we've seen, not only now, but throughout the years as well?
Yeah, that one cannot say really there is a connection. Because the reason why I'm saying there might be less connection, one cannot deny the fact absolutely. But the issue is the young generation currently, when it comes even to culture, they are not following, because they are on their own, and that is where at least the community is messing up. So the culture is no longer that dominant, especially amongst the young generation, because they think always culture is affiliated to being outdated and being, primitive. And that is not being primitive, is how a society should behave. A culture was supposed just to pave the way as to how people should behave. And within the culture, there is no way in one culture that if there is even a broken relationship, people should opt to go to the extreme of even hurting somebody, leave alone killing a person. So that is my position, that at least if the young generation can also go back to some of the good traditional or customary practices, then things will just work out better to the benefit of all Namibians. That can be a contribution.
And doctor, just from your side, how important is it for the mental stability of, again, like I said, victims and perpetrators, for institutions like traditional authorities, like churches, like schools, that construct behavior from a foundational age? How important are these institutions in the grander scheme of this discussion?
No, look, of course, you need institutions in any society, to shape people's behavior and to, and to guide as much as possible. So of course we have to look at all levels of society, including the schools, by the way, where we don't have, proper sex education, which to me means speaking about gender roles as well. The male gender role, the female gender role, what that means, and so on. Certainly from my impression, the way in which I think, people see this, people experience this patriarchy, is this idea that the man is the head of the household. And I think that is what I hear very often, and I think it's really that kind of mindset that's a big part of the problem, because if you think that the man is the head of the household, that means the woman, the children must be subordinate. They must be submissive. It's all about the emotional needs of the man. It's not an equal situation. It's not gender equality. It's not about the man and the woman being equal. And I think that's a big part of it, because these men tend to be quite narcissistic. They tend to be very selfish. They really believe that that their emotional needs should come first. And I think that is the way in which patriarchy is expressed, in these families or in households. And I think that's an important mindset that we should try to counter as much as possible, and speak about, what does that mean? When you say the man is the head of the household, what does it mean? Does it mean, the men can go out weekends, Friday nights, they go to the nightclubs, they stay out, they, hang out with their buddies, they drink, they come back Sunday evening, and they just expect everything to be fine, There must be a plate of food, and the woman mustn't say anything, and so forth. What does it mean when we say the man is the head of the household? Or should it be should be a different setup? If you are committed in a relationship, surely you should be at home Friday nights. You should be, spending time with loved ones. There should be equality in the relationship. What does that mean? It also means equality in terms of emotional needs. Meeting each other halfway. What are the emotional needs of the woman? Because like I said before, in so many of these situations, the women are extraordinarily patient and they stay. But eventually, of course, I think like any other human being, you get tired. If there's so much emotional abuse, eventually, of course, the women get tired and they want to stop the relationship. And then these men tend to react very violently, because they can't handle the breakup of the relationship. Because they have this idea that, the woman belongs to them. That's another part of patriarchy, this notion that, she's my property, she must do, what I want. So it's those kinds of things that we need to look at, that we need to raise, because, a woman isn't your property. Ultimately, she's a human being with her own emotional needs, her own personality, her own life agenda. And if you want to keep her, you have to, make her happy, treat her with respect, that kind of thing. And she has the right to stop the relationship. If she's no longer happy with you, she has the right to walk away and say, look, I'm sorry, this doesn't work for me. And the men should, be mature enough to accept it. And you certainly have no right, to become aggressive or to become violent or even, to kill someone. That's extreme. That's, the other part of this, John Collins, is that we must also say that it's not all the men, of course, who would go so far and to kill someone. Most of the men, of course, accept break up and walk away, but I think there's a small number who become aggressive. And my impression is that they probably grew up in a very violent household, and that is why they think violence is okay. And that is another issue, in terms of the violence within households, which I think is usually about the way in which children are raised, the spanking, the corporal punishment, really physical abuse in the name of disciplining a child. I think these are probably the men. The issue of mental instability, I think it changes the discussion too much for me. I think it's too easy to say, you have a psychological problem and that's the reason. And then we don't look at these wider social issues as well, and try to really understand what's going on at a deeper level and try to find answers at a deeper level. For me, it's too easy to say, he's abnormal, he's got a psychological problem. It doesn't really help us to understand and to find solutions.
Mr. Enkali, perhaps your response to Dr. Whitaker, but also just to speak to us on how traditional authorities, especially the Ondonga Traditional Authority, goes out into the constituents, into the public, or into the ground rather, and speaks on matters like this. Does it happen on a regular basis?
Yes, thank you very much. To answer to that question, it is not very much easy for the traditional authority to go on those on a regular basis, given their position in terms of either financial or capacity, because tradition is based on the traditional norms and culture. That's why now each and every household have got a responsibility based on where they are. Let's say, but the accessibility to the community is that traditional authority have got at all levels. Have got village headmen, they have got cluster headmen, they have got district senior councillors, and then the traditional authority for that specific community. Yeah, they don't go out on daily basis, but those issues, we are also dealing with them, because once things of gender-based violence happen and they report it, then it is brought before the councillors, the traditional councillors, and normally there are also some remedy that is to be taken or sanction to be made, and that is the only way that they can go. But to go all around really like a well-financed institution, it is a bit difficult, because the traditional boundary might even go over 200 kilometers, and it becomes difficult. The spirit and the presence is there, given all those level of leadership from village to the district. So, and I was also thinking that the other thing, once you look at it, because we are talking about tradition, we are talking about a specific community, traditional community. Now, the moment you go from one traditional community to the other, that becomes more or less intercultural relation. And now the culture being different also, that might also contribute, because in one community might be doing this is not a problem, but to the other community or traditional community, doing that is a taboo or it's a problem. So those are also now in a way that traditional community unknowingly or indirectly contribute to those gender-based violence. See that issue of our community doing it this way, our community is doing it this way. That diversity it might be also lacking, and that can also be the cause at traditional authority level, not as a matter of leadership, but as a matter of cultural issues.
Indeed, and that's an interesting point you bring up. And Dr. Whitaker, I want you to listen in, because I'm going to ask you about that shortly. But just to continue on this point, Mr. Enkali, what are you suggesting on that point? Are you saying that the leadership of traditional authorities should perhaps teach their constituents how to deal with intercultural relations, intercultural situations, or what exactly is it are you trying to say?
Yeah, definitely. I think that can be also one of the solutions. Because if people understand that once I move out of this traditional community to the other, the issue that we consider as issues here, they are not issues in that other traditional community, and therefore I have to adjust myself to the real situation that I will find myself in. And it is also good if traditional authority can go on educating communities that as we are living, we are all one. And being one, we differ only in the way we are doing things. So, and therefore, once you find yourself crossing that boundary line or bringing in somebody that has crossed the boundary line or traditional boundary, that you also learn about how things are happening in their community and also give a brief of how things are happening or being done in your community. I think that one is very critical if we want to maintain that environment where everybody can live free from gender-based violence. Thank you.
Dr. Whitaker, your thoughts on that?
I fully agree with Mr. Enkali. I mean, I think, we need to promote a national culture, John Colin. The reality is that, cultures change, cultures evolve. Cultures, of course, are not frozen in time. We live in a very different historical era, in that we live in a democratic society. So we should promote a democratic national culture as much as possible. And that definitely should include, gender equality, non-sexism, and so on. Because look, there's a larger picture. If one looks I'll say very briefly. If you look at violence, there's different components. We tend to speak about direct violence, these incidents. These incidents keep on occurring, and then we obviously, focus on it. We have discussions about it. But it's issues of direct violence, and once again, for me, the cycle of direct violence, of course, starts in the households with the spanking of children. But there's two other important components to violence. There's structural violence and cultural violence. Structural violence, of course, poverty, unemployment, which unfortunately, is getting worse in Namibia. And then, of course, there's cultural violence, racism, sexism, patriarchy, and so on. And these three components of violence tend to, strengthen each other. So we need to, of course, understand the wider context of our socioeconomic crisis. And unfortunately, for that reason, the violence will increase. But there's, of course, a lot we can do in terms of, interpersonal violence, one-to-one violence. And to continue to have this kind of, education, have discussions around it, because people do have control over their behavior. They can manage, they can, decide to walk away. Instead of, wanting to stab your girlfriend or hit your girlfriend, you do have the power to decide and to walk away, and to go and calm down and, talk about it tomorrow and find a different solution. I mean, I think, people do have that personal power, and that's really, why it's important to have this. There's no doubt about the fact that culture is very important and will always be important. And we have to respect our cultures. We must develop a progressive multiculturalism, in Namibia. Look at what are these positive values that we must promote. Of course, we must do that. We must respect languages. We must, of course, inculcate positive values of, respect, equality, and so on. So culture has an important role to play in terms of, promoting such an anti-violence mindset, So for me, definitely, I mean, I fully agree that we need to develop some national culture and of course, positive values as a nation.
We're winding down our conversation with the spokesperson of the Ondonga Traditional Authority, that's Frans Enkali, as well as clinical psychologist Dr. Shaun Whitaker, and we are speaking about the issue of gender-based violence that has really rocked the country with the last couple of weeks or so, seeing more murders than we are used to, and already one murder is one too many. Mr. Enkali and Dr. Whitaker, I want you to listen in as well, because I'll pose the same question to you. We saw a few years back then President Ifike Punye Pohamba saying that we have to pray against gender-based violence. Former First Lady Monica Gengos essentially investigated the root cause of gender-based violence through her various campaigns and platforms. On a national level, how do we deal with this issue of gender-based violence? Mr. Enkali, that's for you.
At national level, I think the approach is related to former president stand on gender-based violence, and then the former first lady stand on gender-based violence. I think we need maybe to put more effort, and to put more effort in that civic education when it comes to issues pertaining to gender. That education should also not be exclusive. It should not exclude anybody, because now, in many cases, I do not know whether I'm wrong or right, but what I have seen, in many a time, you might find that there are programs only for baby girls or girl child. But then, it lacks the involvement of boy child as well. And that way, we educate one side, while the other side, we are leaving it in the darkness. So at the top leadership level, I think we need to devise programs that can be geared forward to address issues of girl-child issues, and also those that address issues of boy-child issues. But again, those separately need also to be brought together, as Dr. Whitaker was referring to, a national culture. A national culture that we should then go beyond that and say, as Namibians, how do you want our people to behave in order to maintain peace and stability and love in the country?
On your end, Dr. Whitaker?
Oh, no, look, I fully agree with what Mr. Enkali said. I mean, there's really nothing to add to that, I think. Let me just one final point at a different level, John Colin, if I may. I just want to say to Namibian men, there's actually very effective medication for that kind of aggression, pathological jealousy, suspiciousness. There's actually very effective medication. So we would like to encourage them to seek help, do something. If you have anger issues, if you have a short temper, if you become violent, there's actually help available at that level. So please do something about it. We are really tired of all this violence, and we really need to respect our women and girls in this country.
Gentlemen, we do thank you so much for making some time for us this morning on a discussion that probably needs more in-depth contribution from those at the national level, but also from those on the ground, those in the streets, from the abusers themselves to the victims as well as your colleagues and people in your spaces. For your time, much appreciated.
Thank you. All the best.
Thank you, Colin. All the best for the day.
Indeed. Thanks. Same to you. Frans Enkali, the spokesperson of the Ondonga Traditional Authority, as well as Dr. Shaun Whitaker, clinical psychologist there, speaking to us on this scary issue of gender-based violence. Thank you so much for tuning in to the rerun. We'll be back again tomorrow with another discussion that you might have missed that is of importance and relevance to you. A very good afternoon from The Bold Voice.